Good evening, everyone. It's about 7:25 and I've just gone live. You can ask me questions on the live chat throughout the program, and then there'll be an opportunity at the end as well. So just to check while we get set up, is the signal coming through? Please send me just a text on the live chat. Let me know if the signal is working and how the connection looks. Okay. Thanks, Dave. Yeah. Sorry. So I've got a few minutes. I was just wondering, has anybody been out skiing much yet this winter? I've been out twice. Blurry picture right now. It's looking good at my end. Maybe just check, see what your bandwidth is like. Jessica. Yeah, that's Mount Sir Donald in the background, by the way, and just outside Glacier National Park by about 100 meters. All right, thanks, Jeff. JW. Clear picture, good sound. Thanks, Anna. All right. So has anybody been out skiing much yet? I was just out at Black Prince over the weekend, and it's a bit thin, but the crusts are giving us some support, so we'll have something that looks sort of like a base for a while. And there's certainly a lot of people getting out and enjoying it. I can appreciate that. It's just about time. Winter is coming. And about a week before this weekend, I was up on Lake Louise, not at the ski area, but actually behind the lake, skiing up onto the glacier, doing some work for a project with the ACC. And that was pretty thin. But what was really interesting, I guess that'd be about 10 days ago now, is that the snowpack was surprisingly touchy. And as we'd move along on the flats, we could trigger on the rolls, some of the wind rolls with ski or remote, and pull out little pockets or have tiny little avalanches go. It wasn't really a concern where we were because we weren't in avalanche terrain, but it definitely brought home the point that I think Parks was right on the mark when they were calling the hazard considerable. We were definitely seeing some stuff ready to go. Okay. So 2 more minutes and off we go. All right. Yeah. This might be a bit more of the way for a while. Certainly in Alberta, we just got cut back a bit more. But so far, it looks like we still all have access to get out in the backcountry. And we have a decent snow for this early in the year. We might just be okay. Get out and enjoy. Okay. Okay. So I think we're getting close enough. I'm almost at 7:30. So thanks everyone for joining us. This is a project put together with the Alpine Club of Canada, and I'd like to thank YYC and the Bow Valley Climbing Club, who've also spread the word out about this program. And so the idea is to try and give everyone sort of the, how we'd have those early season lectures or workshops on basic practices in the mountains. And we have a series of 4 lectures coming up. This is the first one, and it's very simple, an introduction to ski touring. So let's get started. There we go. All right. So as soon as we get the first snowfalls, everyone starts getting excited. And yeah, I understand that. We've kind of got this in-between season before winter, and when the first snow falls, almost without fail, you'll hear people talking that this is it. This is going to be a great winter. I can feel it in my bones. I can tell by the first snowfall. And the truth is, no, we can't. But I fully understand the excitement because while a lot of people like to lock up and hide and just avoid the cold, winter actually gives us some opportunities we don't normally have because the creeks and the rivers and the lakes begin to freeze up. And the snow buries all the obstacles that block us from summer travel. And suddenly, places we could never get to in the summer become much more accessible and pretty reasonable in the winter. So it really is kind of a gift. We like to think of summer as the time when everybody gets out to play, but winter gives us the opportunities to really explore. And yeah, once you put on a pair of skis, it gets even better. So I'm going to focus with my family first. That's our son when he's at 7 years old. We did the Wapta Traverse with him at the age of 12. And then by the time he was 14, we started doing some of the bigger stuff. And there he is, bopping away to I don't know what, as we ski the Spray Range Traverse. So that was at the age of 14. That's a pretty serious route. And the reason I'm focusing with my family is I work as a guide for a living. So I take people out into the mountains on a regular basis. But it really shouldn't matter whether you're taking strangers or you're taking your friends out. Whenever you go in the mountains, at the end of the day, we all want to come home. And so I firmly believe that my standard of care should be the same with my family here standing on the summit of Mount Olive, or anyone else, whether it's friends. Because so often I've heard people say, you know, I would never do this with my family, or I'd never take my children out here. And I think that's a bit of a misnomer. If you're willing to do it, why wouldn't you take your family out? Because you're planning to come home. And frankly, you know, you're somebody's child as well. Your parents are going to miss you if you're not too old and they haven't passed away yet. So there really should be a common standard. And to be honest, I don't know that we're really driven by fear in our sense of adventure. I get just as much pleasure skiing a run if I don't have to worry about any of the safety concerns. We've taken the time to figure things out and move safely through the landscape. It's fun. I don't need the added stress of whether or not I'm right or not. And so I think that's a huge factor. And so if you're going to go out in the backcountry and you're going to go play, you know, we kind of start with ski touring. Ski touring gets us out, and it's almost like a gateway. You get out and you begin to explore. And once you begin to explore, you realize there's more. And it can take you in so many different directions. They can be simple day trips. They can start to extend into longer tours. It can become ski mountaineering, or it can become multi-day ski traverses. Or you can just dial it back and do these nice, easy, comfortable days. It's all really just variations of the same sport. Okay, so probably the first thing you're going to do when you're planning for a trip, or you're just getting involved with ski touring, getting out for the winter, you're going to want to look at the basics. We'll start right down there with your personal equipment. So you're going to need a transceiver, a probe, and shovel, basic avalanche equipment. However, I will recommend one more piece of equipment as basic, and that should be a helmet. Because in Canada, we tend to ski terrain that has consequences. We have much higher fatality rates due to trauma. And so I think you should be carrying a helmet. The evidence supports it. It really should be the fourth piece of avalanche rescue gear. And with that, you know, you've got a reasonable piece of equipment to deal with problems. Airbags are also very useful. They're amazing pieces of technology. I'm sure someone's going to ask me if I use one. If they made a pack with a larger airbag, or a larger pack with an airbag, I would. Unfortunately, the current models out there don't really fit everything I need to take into the backcountry as a guide. So it doesn't fit. When that changes, I will move to an airbag. So in terms of a transceiver, just get a current model, please. Probably not a good idea to buy used just because you don't know its history. And they're all good. Any industry, three antenna transceiver is totally fine in our industry now. For probes, you know, Look for something basic. Don't get anything too expensive because you break them. I break a probe about once every 2 or 3 years. What we do recommend is you get a probe that's fairly long. We now recommend at least 3 meters. Shovel, get a good metal shovel. Don't waste your time on more expensive lightweight gear. The one piece of equipment that has to be solid, robust, and be able to work is your shovel. You got to get them out. Or you're going to hit the ditch and you got to get the car out. Or you get to the campground and the outhouse is buried and you've got to dig it out. Shovels get used a lot. Get a good shovel. If I am guiding and I see people arriving with shovels that do not have a metal blade and a good solid handle, I have spares and I give it to them. Because who's going to be digging me out? I want good shovels on there, so don't waste your time. Helmets, any industry standard is fine. Airbags, yeah, explore. They range in price from about $600 or $700 to well over $1,000. So for touring equipment, skis are great. And there's lots of really beautiful backcountry skis out there. For the longest time, I just used the most basic all-mountain skis. I'd go to a secondhand shop and I'd find some of the old all-mountain skis that were just being used at the ski hill. Mount the bindings on it and I was good to go. If you want to go with skis that are specially designed, I'm using them now, but it's not essential. Skins, a lot of skins out there. Again, just find one you like. Currently, I'm using a full nylon skin just because it's more durable. The nylon mohair mix apparently, is a nice balance, and the mohairs do move with a lot less friction, so there's less work, but they also wear faster, so they don't last as long. And I'm pretty hard on my equipment. I'm out, 70, 80 days in a winter easily. Ski crampons. Very few people have ski crampons, and most people don't even know what they are. I'll show them to you in a little while. But ski crampons are a good idea. And the reason for that is if you get into a snowpack and, sorry, just checking a few things here, and the snow is really hard, it's a crust or it's a wind slab and you can't get your skis to set in the snow, you're going to skitter off. Ski crampons are literally teeth that you strap onto your skis and they bite in the snow. They're wonderful. If you don't have them, I think I've used them 5 or 6 times in the last 10 years. Don't take them, on a typical day, but come spring or you get into an area where you've got big issues with wind, they can really help. The problem with ski crampons is if not everyone has them, then you've got a problem, because a couple of the courses I've taught, all but one person has skins, which means I either have to leave that person somewhere in the backcountry, or we all do it without crampons, and that's usually what I do. Is we just go without the crampons, we take skis, and then we work on it. Sometimes that is a bit difficult. So they're nice, they're not essential, good to have. Ski boots. When I buy ski boots, I basically just buy boots that are really comfortable. I close my eyes, keep putting on the ski boots till I find the pair that fits the best. And without a doubt, they're among the most expensive. Buy them. Bad ski boots or tight ski boots or loose ski boots are going to cause chafing, you're going to have blisters, you're going to be in pain. If you don't use your ski boots, you're not getting out. They last a long time. Again, I get about 10 years out of a pair of ski boots, and I am skiing heavily throughout the winter. So they're a good investment. Get a good solid one. The new ski boots, the really lightweight ones for skimo or ski mountaineering racing, they're amazing boots, but they're not as durable. So again, you're going to have to balance. Find a boot that's not so incredibly heavy you'll never want to use it. But when you start getting into the high-end specialty boots, you also run into a problem that they may just not survive long-term use. I was chatting with somebody at a shop about ski boots, and he was telling me that, well, these ski boots are great. You'll get at least 150 days out of them. And I looked at him and said, well, that's not even 2 seasons. And he looked a bit shocked, but that's the trade-off. They were beautiful, lightweight boots, but I want to get at least 5 or 6 years out of a pair of boots. So choose what works best for you. Snowshoes, yeah, nothing wrong with snowshoes. Go ahead and play. Okay, don't record this. I'm a ski guide. I'm not allowed to say that because they're snowshoes. But hey, could be worse. By all means, if you're a snowshoer and you want to get out and snowshoe, or even if you want to do longer distances on snowshoes, go right ahead. We traveled the country on snowshoes before we had skis. They do work. The one thing you have to be careful of, though, if you're snowshoeing through the mountains, snowshoes do not mean you're not in avalanche terrain. And Avalanche Canada is now making a concerted effort to try and reach the snowshoeing community and let them know that they need to have a basic understanding of avalanche safety when they're snowshoeing in the mountains, because that is the user group that is seeing the highest increase in avalanche incidents right now. So snowshoers, go for it, but you know what? It's time to also up your game and learn a bit more about avalanche safety. Snowboards. If you have a split board, those actually work pretty well. They're not as good as skis yet, but give them a few more generations and I suspect we're going to be fighting to see who's faster in the backcountry. Snowboards are great. Just remember, you're going to need to know how to use them, and they're a bit more complicated than skis to take apart and put back together. My advice is find yourself a good movie, sit down, watch the movie, and put your snowboard together and take it apart at least a dozen times during the movie before you go out the first few trips, and that way you get really comfortable with all the little pieces. You also may need to carry a few extra parts and a few extra tools just to manage the specialty parts on your snowboard. But I've had plenty of snowboarders who've skied the Wapta and gotten up into some pretty high mountain places. They're working well. Okay. Poles. I tend to actually like non-adjustable rigid poles because they're stronger and they're cheaper. However, I do use adjustable poles, and the reason I use adjustable poles is because if a friend or a guest or a client breaks a pole or loses a pole, I will give them mine and I'll just go on with one. So I use adjustables, but I think just the rigid poles are a really good system. You don't need to change the height of your poles very often. You can usually get by with just one. So that's your basic equipment. You know, you can look at the basic clothing. I'm not going to get into that too much. And the other things we need. Group equipment's a little different. This is the kind of stuff that not everyone needs in their pack, but you probably should have it on your tour. And I'll lighten this load up a bit, and you can take a look. So you need a good first aid kit. You need a decent repair kit. A basic shelter, just a tarp or bivy sack, even an old tent fly is fine. But something you can use to protect an injured person from the elements if you're out in an exposed location. Sometimes we like to think, well, we'll move the person. And maybe you can, but in truth, you're not moving people very far. You might get them a few hundred meters, but beyond that, it's pretty hard. It's very physical, and it's a lot of work. So don't plan on huge distances. You can use your pack, a foam pad, or whatever else as some sort of a ground insulator. They're nice to have. Most of the snow saws we have today that are used for avalanche work or for building an igloo, they'll also cut wood. And that's nice because they have a dual purpose. It's good having one of these in the group because if you do get stuck out overnight, you can take your saw, you can cut some branches, and you can just keep stacking them. And a stack of branches is a great insulator from the snow. You can also start cutting up some small trees that have been dead and dried, and you can get a fire going. You can also use them to help build the framework for a lean-to or a shelter. And then you've got something to throw your tarp over, tie it down with a few straps, and you're going to be okay for the night. So just a few simple things like that. Lighters and matches. I don't use matches in winter because I find they're really ineffective. I do use lighters, but they don't start. Not unless you stick them in your mitt and you warm them up for about 4 or 5 minutes and just keep shaking it. Then they work fine for a few more minutes. And you can get a fire started. Fire starter is great. Yeah, below tree line, these are really nice ways to get through the night. And getting stuck out overnight is, you know, I'd love to say we're all too clever to do it, but it's happened to the best of us a few times. And actually, I think that might have helped me get married because I was able to keep my spouse, before we were married, reasonably warm and comfortable. To that point, it's worth having just a little extra food. That'll help keep you warmer. And also, if somebody forgets their food or doesn't have enough, you know, there's a little extra in the group. For navigation, map and compass are kind of my standard. If I'm going into an area where I have any hesitation about my familiarity with the area, I've got a map and compass. I'm old. For today's community, GPS and tools like Gaia or Fat Maps on your phone, they do work really well. Altimeters are pretty much now all built onto your wrist with the watch, and some GPS units will do altitude as well. GPS altitude isn't all that accurate. but the rest of their location is. And just find the combination that works for you. But within the group, have them if they're going into a place where there's even the slightest chance of getting lost. Okay, so beyond that, emergency communication is a good idea. You know, 30 years ago, you'd go into the backcountry and no one would hear from you. And part of that was, just a reality of the situation. And part of it was an element of the adventure as well. Today, we expect to have communication with people we're traveling with, or if we need assistance. And Parks really does appreciate this. Cell phones work, but they only work in a few places in the mountains. If you're familiar with the Rockies, basically anywhere you can see the Trans-Canada Highway, you've got a fairly good chance of getting a cell phone signal. But as soon as you're off the Trans-Canada, your phone's probably dead. Now, an alternative is a satellite phone. You can rent them for as little as $10 to $20 a day, and you can phone anyone, anywhere in the world. The only thing you can't do with a satellite phone is do not dial 911 because it has no idea which district to connect to. And so by default, you're going to get a phone call into Toronto or Montreal. That doesn't really help you if you're in Western Canada. So just make sure you know your emergency numbers. An PLB, Personal Locator Beacon. And those are things like the Spot, the InReach, they're great. They work very well. You push the button and basically it's a call for help. Okay, they work nicely too. VHF radios, if you're a ham operator or you're part of a club that has access to some of these things, VHF radios can be really useful. And if you have the frequencies, you can contact the rescue authorities directly. But that tends to be a bit more specialized. Satellite phones and the personal beacons are really probably the way to go. Okay, within the group. Then for your snow study kit, really, carry that little evaluator card you got on your AST1, or if you haven't got it, buy one. I think you can get it at MEC. Get a slope meter. You can download them onto your phone, or you can simply buy them. I bought mine for $20 because I don't take my phone into the backcountry. And it's just a little ball bearing on a rolled gauge, and basically it helps measure your slope because we need to know our slope angles in terms of avalanche safety. Carry a little bit of cord. I've got 2 pieces of cord that go into my repair kit. One of them I can use for cutting blocks. And then maybe a thermometer, and that's it. It's pretty small, pretty basic. So let's take a look. This is what I actually put into my pack. Okay, and this includes both my personal and group gear because as the guide, I carry all the group gear. Yeah, very glamorous. So let's take a look. So that's my tarp. Folds up. I can easily put 3 people sitting in there. And then here's my old down coat. Down lasts forever. I had that coat made for me in 1988. It's very warm. It's a good extra coat in case somebody gets cold. First aid kit, I'm not opening it up because that's a whole different course, but have an adequate first aid kit. Okay. So I have a VHF radio. Down below is a sat phone and a little InReach. The InReach are incredibly tiny. You do have to buy a monthly subscription, but they are great systems. Okay, so compass, GPS. It really depends how old you are, I guess. I focus on the compass, but I do have both on some occasions. So I do carry a field book, should have one in the group. My rescue card is in there, an emergency response plan, first aid form, and emergency phone numbers, and this is where I like to keep my maps. I'll photocopy or print them out, and it all fits in a nice little book, and I got everything I need. There's the slope meter, working its way up the slope. Somebody asked about a repair kit. Let me show you what I put in my repair kit. Oh, first, avalanche bulletin, yeah. You may be able to store this on your phone or print out a copy and keep it so the group can read it and decide on their best decisions. This is my repair kit. I carry 2 straps, some cord, the tail clip for a pair of skins, a screwdriver, a multi-tool, and enough batteries that I could replace my headlamp or my avalanche transceiver. It's really simple. If you have specific pieces for your binding that are an issue, take them because they're not going to be in a group repair kit. That's my snow saw. It also cuts wood. And then this is what everybody needs to carry. Everyone needs a good, solid metal shovel. Don't accept less. The only 2 shovels that have ever passed the independent Swiss test was the Volet TelePro and the G3. G3, I think it was the Avitech. Carry a good probe, avalanche transceiver. As I mentioned, all the new beacons are fine. Choose the one that works for you. And then, of course, we're never late, bring a headlamp because you just might be. And I cannot tell you how much nicer it is, and they weigh nothing. And that'll last you pretty much the entire night. Take your extra clothing, so you know you've got an extra gloves and mitts. Water is really tricky. If it's very cold, don't use those platypus or backpack things. Use an open mouth, and if it's brutally cold, a thermos is the only thing that won't freeze. It's always nice to have a few little rolls of toilet paper for the simple reason you can sell them for about $5 a sheet. Bring your skins along. I know that sounds silly, but there's some trips where you start on flat ground, you don't need your skins, then you ski down, and then you got to go back up to get to the car. And you're hooped if you don't have your skins. These are crampons, ski crampons. They clip on just under the toe, and every time you step, those are driven into the snowpack. Very rarely used. It's nice to have them on standby. Then you put on your pack, slap on your sunglasses, and you're good to go. So that's basic backpacking. So did that help, Nikki, to know what I have in my repair kit? There's two other things I will sometimes carry in my repair kit. And I'll go to Canadian Tire and I'll get two really big hose clamps. And you can actually thread the two of them together so they become one giant hose clamp. And a giant hose clamp will allow you to basically zap strap your boot to a ski, or your boot to a snowboard, or your boot to a snowshoe, and there's no flex, but if the binding breaks and blows to pieces, you can still zap strap them in with a really solid system. And I had one guy walk out on that for 3 days, and it worked. I mean, he wasn't thrilled with it, but we were able to continue it, because frankly, if your binding breaks and you're way out there, either we leave you for the wolves or we call for a rescue. So little things like that can make a huge difference. And I hate leaving people behind, although I think it's in my waiver. Okay, so that's your basic gear. You've got your pack piled up, but that's not everything you need to know before you go on a trip. Because if you look at these three gentlemen, they're not having a good night. And I actually saw them coming down in the dark. So that's poor planning. You want to plan your trip before you go into the backcountry, just so you have a pretty good idea of what you're up against and you can enjoy yourself. So here's a little trip planner. And if you want, I will send a copy to everybody of the trip planner. It's from my Avalanche ebook. And you can check the hazard, go to avalanche.ca. And here we are. So where do we want to go? I don't know. Let's zoom in a bit, shall we? How about Banff? So we click on Banff, and here's the bulletin. So Parks has given us a bulletin. It was released today. It's valid till tomorrow at about 4 p.m. And they're saying strong to extreme winds and recent snow will keep the avalanche hazard elevated in the Alpine. Watch for sloughing and steep confined terrain. Uncertainty surrounds the November 5th crust facet layer and what it will take to become reactive. Okay, so they're giving us information about the snowpack. That top information gives you probably their biggest concern. As you come down, you get the rating: considerable, moderate, low. I won't get into these ratings too much because that's an avalanche course, but needless to say, when we say the avalanche hazard is considerable, it is time to pay attention. There are real problems here. Even at moderate, there are places we have to be careful with. In low, you don't turn your brain off, but it's pretty good. It's about as good as you can hope it to get. It's never perfectly safe. Now into the future, they expect Friday and Saturday to be about the same. And their confidence is moderate, which means there could be places that are a bit different. Okay? If they had high confidence, then we would know that they're pretty certain that this is found throughout the region. As it is, we're in pretty good shape, but it's not a guarantee. The main problem is wind, and the wind is blowing snow, and so our most dominant wind comes from the west. When we talk about a west wind, it's a wind that blows from the west and to the east. So all these slopes are getting snow dumped onto them from those westerlies. As a result, that accumulated snow can settle and bond fairly quickly because the temperatures are mild, the snow has been bashed up and turned into smaller particles, and we're getting some stiff layers in the snow that could react. They're saying the chances of an avalanche are between possible and likely. I don't exactly know what that means, to be honest. What possible is and what likely is. Is that 50-50, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000? I'm not sure. But what it does indicate is the potential exists. You could do it. and you can do it particularly on these aspects, on those slopes. And you can expect the avalanche to be size 1 to size 2, and a size 2 is enough to bury and kill you. So that's a concern. Okay. Now the travel train of ice, if triggered, the wind slab may step down to deeper layers, resulting in larger avalanches. Be careful with wind-loaded pockets, especially near ridge crests and rollovers. So as you transition into off the windy slopes into the sheltered features, be careful. Be particularly careful. And you need to know your slopes. Why you have a slope meter. Okay. The next concern are deep persistent slabs. We have a couple of weak layers deep in the snowpack from the crusts that formed, and as a result, they're going to haunt us probably for at least the next month or two. We have to be careful. They're not seeing anything yet, but they know the potential exists. So they've got this tuned down a bit. It's everywhere, and the potential exists for larger avalanches. So this is why they're giving us a considerable rating in the Alpine. The reason it's low below tree line is because we have trees to help anchor the slope, but also because there isn't as much snow. And this is just the transition zone between the two. So that gives us a pretty good piece of information, but what do you do with it? You know, this was the problem for the longest time, is now, what do we do with this information? How do we figure out where are we going to go? Well, thank goodness, Parks Canada did a really nice job of resolving that for us. But before we do that, you also want to check the weather. I forgot about that. So, click on Alberta. I live in Canmore. But current conditions, where did I click for? Edmonton. Okay, let's not go to Edmonton. There's skiing in Edmonton. The mountain skiing in Edmonton's a bit limited. Okay, so we're in here. Alberta. Scroll down. Let's look at Banff. Oh, current conditions. We're looking at warm temperatures and flurries, bit of flurries, gusting 20, 40, 60. Yeah, we're looking at fair bit of wind, and very mild temperatures. So we got that information as well. And then we take that information and you look at who's in your group. What type of a group do you have? What are your interests, are your ability? Do you want to go ice climbing? Do you want to go snowshoeing? Do you want to go ski touring? Do you want to do a ski ascent up a big peak? Do you want to line yourself up and do a big ski down? Or do you just want to get out with the family and go for a really beautiful day in nice moderate terrain? You have to decide. And once you kind of figured out what you want to do and you know your group and their desires, then you can go and you can pull up something called the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale. This is really nice. By the way, if you do ATES for Banff National Park, you will get to the site all on your own. And that will load this PDF. And you can pull it up and they'll explain basically how it works. They have 3 different ratings. They have simple, challenging, and complex terrain. Simple is predominantly safe with very little or limited exposure to avalanches. Challenging, there is avalanche terrain. However, with care and attention, you can avoid that avalanche terrain. There's usually just a single problem with options to mitigate or even eliminate the hazard if you're careful about how you move. Complex terrain, in order to complete the objective in complex terrain, you have to expose yourself to avalanche terrain. And in many cases, you either expose yourself to multiple slopes or you have to actually go through the start zone of the avalanche zone. So this is when conditions are quite stable that we might consider going into complex terrain. And here you go. Here's 5 years worth of ski touring in the national parks. K-Country, Kananaskis, has a similar system, but they seem to be in the process of upgrading it, and it's no longer online. If you would like K-Country's old avalanche terrain exposure scale, I would be happy to send it to you. I have the PDF and more than willing to share it. They will be updating this, and parks will be updating theirs because the scale is going to change a bit in the next year or so, but it's not there yet, and the changes will not be difficult to understand. They're just expanding on this one a little bit. Okay, so simple, challenging, complex terrain. Let's look at Banff National Park. We've got all these options for complex. In Banff, we also have all these options for challenging, all these options for simple. So there's about 5 years worth of good touring. And if you stick to the trails, you're in pretty good shape, because what you do is you take the hazard, and right now the hazard is rated at considerable. So if you want to go into class 1 simple terrain, go down to here where it says simple, go up to considerable, and you're in the green. Basically what that says is use normal caution. If you want to go into challenging terrain in considerable hazard, they're advising extra caution. And what that means is it's not sort of like, we don't know either. What they're saying, in fact, is you need to be careful because there are slopes that could avalanche. However, there are options available. And if you're able to identify those options and employ them, or if you know the area well enough that you know places to avoid, it's not an unreasonable thing. The other thing you can do is if you're going into an area you don't know, but you've got reasonable visibility, you can look over the landscape and approach it. And every time you come into an area of concern, you can decide whether or not there's a safe option. And if you decide that the options are not safe, then you turn around and you go back off. So this is what we mean by extra caution. It's not yes, no, or, you're on your own. Basically what we're saying is this is a situation where you need to be able to either know the area with good local knowledge, or you can make some decisions one way or another, or you're just prepared to turn around and go back as soon as you realize this is more than you're comfortable able to deal with. Under considerable hazard in the Alpine, travel is not recommended. And the reason for that is you're either exposed to too many slopes, or you're going to have to spend a significant period of time going right through the start zone, the place where the avalanche can be triggered. So we use the bulletin, we use the weather forecast, and we use the 8 scale, and all of a sudden we can figure out pretty quickly where are safe places to go. You gotta love that. They did a very nice job with this. So now we've got that information. Now, once you put a trip plan together, or put together your trip, have an option, because it's possible that there might be something else that doesn't make that trip a go. It could be the weather, it could be the quality of the snow, or it could be you suddenly realize things are worse than you thought they were. And you need a plan B. So you come up with another area to go touring. And that just allows you to have a good day, as opposed to going part way out and then realize, oh, we can't do this. And you're just driving home feeling kind of wasted. With a plan, you can do it. I have to go out because I do this for a living. And some days are just horrible. Like it's just a howling blizzard. And I'll look at the group and I see all these very sort of nervous, tentative people because we're going to go ski up some big peak. And I just say, it's a pretty ugly day, isn't it? But listen, there's a pocket of trees that has some beautiful skiing. We'll be out of the wind, and this storm will probably have 40 centimeters of fresh powder on reasonably angled slopes with no overhead hazard, and we can just shred. And all of a sudden, we all have a good day. So have a plan B. It works. Okay. So after that, leave word with a responsible person who will miss you. My advice is the person most likely to miss you is your mother. If you can leave word with your mother, that's your best choice. Fathers are a pretty good second. But, Mom will never, if you tell Mom you're going to be back by 5 p.m., she might make it till 5:05 before she calls the park wardens. Fine. That's totally fair game, because the park wardens are just going to get off the phone and they're going to say, yep, we got another mother. But listen, there's a group overdue. They're hanging out in Crowfoot Glades. You've got that 5 o'clock survey truck going up. Let's have them check, see if the car's still there, see if they can see them coming across the lake. And if not, you know what? It'll be a bit later. We need to start looking for them. And if they see you coming across the lake and you're just trundling along because somebody's binding is blown and their ski's broken in half, and you zap-strapped it together with a couple of hose clamps, and you're just trundling over, they're going to ski out to you and say, is everyone okay? And you look at them kind of sheepishly and say, yeah, but I hit a tree and broke my binding and it's taken me 4 hours to get out. And they're just going to say, as long as you're okay. Here's their card. Give us a call when you get out. If we don't hear from you by such a time, we're going to come back and check on you. They're very good at what they do. Don't be afraid. Put together just an outline of where you're going. Give it to someone responsible so they know where you are, the route you're doing, when you're going to be back, your group size. And if anybody has any really significant medical conditions, maybe just put that on the side. You have a diabetic or something to this effect, because those do become a bit more time sensitive. But it doesn't mean you can't go. In fact, go and have fun. But just make sure someone's going to miss you. All right. Then go through those checklists we just did. And as you're going out the door, if it wasn't the night before, check the avalanche hazard. just before you leave, because maybe things got better. Maybe they got worse. Maybe they haven't changed. But at least you know. You've got the most current information available to plan. And then as you're going out, look in the field. You know, is the weather matching what everybody said? You're getting the amount of snowfall they expected, temperatures, wind. Just get a sense of, you know, is this the kind of day they thought it was going to be? Because we never get the weather right 100% of the time. And we never get the bulletin right 100% of the time. But everyone works as hard as they can to give you the best information possible. Okay? So I'm just going to do a check here. Yep, things are looking good. Now, beyond that, you get back from your trip, you sit down and talk to your group. So how was the day? Did everyone have a good time? And did everyone feel that the trip was safe? People should be allowed to express themselves and say, yeah, I felt it was really good. Or, you know, I was a bit creeped up when we were setting that up track and we were right above that cliff and we had that really scary kick turn. You know, maybe we need to fix that. It's something you can do. Okay. Or they can just say, yeah, it was more than reasonable. I think we can do more. And you can say, ah, cool. And you go through the guidebooks and you look through everything and you say, yeah. And you put together some new plans. But you can also look back and say, yeah, you know, we had some trouble with our sat phone, or this ski didn't work quite right, or those skins are getting a bit old, they're coming off. Let's address that, fix that, or replace it so that our next trip, they don't break down and cause us grief. So that kind of information is great. And also, it lets everybody get a chance to really, you know, say how they felt. And more often than not, they're like, wow, that was fantastic. And then the last thing you do is you go over here and you post your information on something called the Mountain Information Network. And the MIN, or the Mountain Information Network, here's the video on how to get it. Contact Avalanche Canada. You can download the app for your smartphone. And then what you can do is at the end, you can actually write a short summary of your trip and post it. And I'll show you where it appears, but it pops up on the Avalanche Bulletin so other people can use it for their trip. It's great. It's a really nice tool. So one of the things that's happening with things like the MIN is avalanche forecasters are now using public information to help them get a better idea of what's going on out in the mountains. And it's proven to be really valid. There's a concept called wisdom of the crowds. And they did an experiment in the States where they ran out of money, but they managed to get a grant. So they could no longer forecast for some areas in the States, but they didn't want to leave these people empty. So they managed to secure a grant, and they built a simple app. And everybody who went out skiing, they asked them to load this app on their phone and share their information. And the app would gather the data from everybody and then go through a very simple algorithm and actually release a basic avalanche bulletin for that region. And what they found is if they had enough people feeding into their device, the avalanche bulletin that the app developed was actually really good. It wasn't too far off what a professional forecaster would do. So getting your information out there and sharing it with others is a really powerful tool that tends to make our world a lot safer. Okay, so don't be shy. Just on the side, I've noticed a few people have asked about the K-Country 8 scale. I'll show you my email address at the end of the presentation. Write it down. Just fire me an email and I will send you the K-Country PDF. As I said, it is dated now, but there is no replacement at the moment. As soon as there is, I have no doubt K-Country will put it up on their site. Okay, so that's basic planning. Now, if you want to get a little more into it, you're doing a trip that's a little longer, a little bigger. You want to calculate out your times. Because let's say you're planning a big day. You want to go do a ski ascent on Mount Hector. That's a lot of vertical. It's over 1,600 meters, and I can't remember. It's about 7 or 11 kilometers one way. So it's got a fair bit to deal with. So what you can do is you can stop, you can pull it out, and you can actually pull up a map, or you can use some of the digital tools available. Look at the distance, look at the elevation gain, and then basically calculate your travel time. Up here, it's 3 or 4 kilometers an hour in really good conditions. 2 to 3 kilometers an hour if, you know, things aren't ideal, but they're not bad. Poor weather, whiteout, or deep snow, you may only max out at 2 kilometers an hour or less. And is this really important? Yeah, actually it is. Because what you can do is you can calculate how long it's going to take you to get to the top of that peak. And so if you think it's going to take you 7 hours to get to the summit, and you leave the trailhead at 7 a.m., then basically you expect to summit by, okay, it's 5 hours, at around 2 p.m. Okay, and that means on a day like today, you would have about 2.5 hours of daylight to get down, which is basically you ski right back to the car. So that's quite reasonable. But then when you start looking at your trip plan and you discover that you're 5 hours into your day and you're still quite a bit less than halfway, this probably isn't going to work. And so you can see before it becomes an issue whether or not this is a reasonable objective for you. And then you can stop, you can readjust your plans, go for a smaller peak, line yourself up for a really good ski line, and then you're not having to pull all that emergency gear out of your pack and spend the night on the summit because you got there to watch the sunset and you can't see the descent through the rocks. So welcome to my world. But these are the things that happen. And so by literally breaking down your trip, you can get a sense of where you should be at what time. And after a couple of trips, you can set your own times because some people are much faster. They can travel much faster than 3 or 4 kilometers an hour in good conditions. And some people are a bit slower. The numbers I have, and this is a trip planner, are just represent averages. And from there, you then build on and you get a little better. So this is a very traditional looking thing. Literally, I drew this on a map. I print out the map, I draw out my lines, I measure the distances, I calculate my travel times and estimate. And this doesn't include breaks, but this is how long I think it would take me to get to the Bow Hut. So 0.5, 3/4 of an hour, 1.25, 2.75, 3.75, basically 5 hours. I'm saying it's going to take me to get from here to the hut. And you know what? When I'm traveling with people who are new to the backcountry, that's about what it does take, about 5 hours, plus some breaks. So it's an easy day. If I'm just going in there to get a load in, I'm hauling some loads for a friend, or I'm just going up there because I've got to retrieve something I've forgotten, that never happens, you know, I can get up there in 3 or 4 hours. But this is a really good tool to see how you're moving with your group. And there have been a couple of times when I've gotten 2/3 of the way and I've looked at my group and said, listen, we can still get back to the car, but we're down to about a pretty tight time to get to the hut before dark. And I could use this as my aid. Now, something that's really cool, go to Google Earth. Google Earth has got far more tools than I can describe and I'm familiar with. I'm old. But I'm really impressed with what it has to offer sometimes. I think it's on the next page. With Google Earth, you can actually zoom into various peaks, like Mount Field. And you can take a transect. You can go from the summit and measure a line down, and it'll actually plot the slope angle for you. So you can get a sense of what your slope angles are. Another thing you can do is you can go to here to CalTopo, and CalTopo will allow you to use overlays. They're basically maps, and these overlays, the color code represents slope angle. So the yellow represents 27 to 29 degrees. So that's below avalanche terrain most of the time. 30 to 31 degrees. Okay, that's pretty tight. But you can see the orange. We're just starting to get steep enough to be a concern for avalanches. 32 to 34, 35 to 45, 46 to 50. I was suspicious about how accurate this would be, so I field tested it. I've been to Mount Field, and I've actually measured slopes, carrying this map with me. And you know what? There's local anomalies, but as a general rule, it's pretty close. It's more than good enough to get a sense of what you're up against. And I then did the same thing going up onto the Columbia ice fields, and I measured the slopes of Mount Columbia. And I was a bit suspicious because they were telling me Mount Columbia was 50 degrees in some sections. I've climbed Mount Columbia a few times. I don't remember it being 50 degrees. So the last time I was up there, which was the winter before last, I actually pulled out my slope meter and I started measuring the slope as I went up. And guess what? It gets pretty close to 50 degrees in places. It's a really good reference. It's not going to be exact for every square meter on the ground, but it's good information. So don't hesitate. And then the other thing you do are guidebooks. So they've been moving some of the web pages around and my links are broken. But Summits and Ice Fields by Chick Scott and Mark Clausen. I know both these guides well enough to say hello, and I've worked with Mark a bit. They're very good. Summits and Ice Fields gives a really good overall description of the landscape, and they use the avalanche terrain exposure scale. So you can see what the 8's terrain is rated, and they've done a very nice job. Backcountry Skiing Canada, this for some reason no longer works on their website, but look them up. If you're looking for guidebooks for some of the less popular areas, places like around Nelson or some of the more remote traverses that just don't get the attention, this is a great site because they carry a lot of the ski books that are really local in nature. So for areas that we just wouldn't carry on a large scale. If you're in the Rockies, you probably know of Marcus Barano. Marcus has written a couple of good ski books around the Lake Louise area. And he's done a nice, it's a well done book. The only thing I've noticed is the avalanche terrain exposure scale is not rated there. But keep in mind, Marcus is a pretty hardcore skier, and most of the routes he's pointing out are complex. Rogers Pass, Uptracks, Boot Packs, and Bushwhacks. Okay, these guys, their link is still in place. This is pretty much the only guidebook for Rogers Pass, and they have a map to go with it. So it is a nice book. It's fairly artistic. It's got some great photographs in it. I do not know about the update. The previous version is the one I have. It has no index in the back, and so I find it a bit hard to find the specific routes I want to do. And it did not use the avalanche terrain exposure scale, but they have updated it. That may have changed. Whenever I talk to other guides, they all recommend John Baldwin's book, and he has a whole page on it, Exploring the Coast Mountains. Great resource. And then there's even one here for the Yukon. So if you're looking for information, this is a great resource. You can go beyond that, the Mountain Information Network. Let's take a look, see what I got here. There we go. So what the min is you see right here where it says 3? Let's zoom in on that. There they are, all 3 of them. You can click on one of them, and it'll give you information. So the information was submitted by this individual on Sunday, November 22nd. This is their exact location. If you want to plug it into Google Earth, it'll zoom you in beautifully. This is the information, what they stayed away from. The day was windy, warm, snow conditions were crusty, wind affected powder. They skied in the Alpine. The quality overall was good. Comments? Okay, some small 30-centimeter cracking was noticed when skinning around the lake. Powder on the skin track had all blown away in the Alpine. Significant wind effects. Snow depth on a northwest ridge varied from 0.3 to 0.5 meters. Moderately stiff. Yet light crust was easy to punch through, still plenty of fun to ski. Some surface hoar was beginning to form. So they're sharing information about their day and the quality of it. And this is the min. If they have an avalanche event, they'll give that. If they have snowpack data, okay. They didn't see any wumping, radiating cracks. These are the conditions. If you've taken a basic avalanche course, this will mean more to you. But just in terms of getting out and finding out what the conditions were like, these can be really useful. They may also include photographs and other details. So you can do this too. You can just post on here and you can also view it. Something else that's really nice is this. Weather stations. You can click on remote weather stations and it will give you information not current, but an hour old. So this is basically what the conditions were like at the Stanley Weather Station. So that's around Mount Stanley at 7 p.m. And here are the temperatures. And I'm not sure what this is. I'm sorry. Oh, height of snow and the new snow. Okay, so you can see if it's snowing. You can see what the snowpack is. You can see the temperature. Different sites have different levels of information, and some of them are really detailed. One of the best is Bow Summit. Rogers Pass has also got some good weather stations. So you can get almost real-time information on what the conditions are like where you're going. Now, having said that, don't necessarily let these things scare you off, because a few times I've been watching weather stations when I knew the hazard was creeping up. And I had to go because it was work, but I was thinking this is going to be terrible. Again, we just switched to plan B, moved into the trees, and it was a great day. So it's useful. The other thing you can do is you can get information on the Mountain Conditions Report. And this is posted by the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides. You can access the observations here. You can subscribe to the MCR. basically, you can only receive information. This information is given by guides, and we make it available to the public. So that gives you information from people you know at least have some experience in the mountains and are out on a fairly regular basis. So those are other resources you can use. And then here we are, let's see. Parks Canada has a Facebook page. Oh no, sorry, they have their own mountain safety. So you can get in here and you can check out their information on their links for the park. Kananaskis has a Facebook page. And this is worth following. Oh, they've moved it. If you're moving out of this part of the world, Avalanche Quebec is the very same thing as Avalanche Canada, but it's in Quebec, and they are providing professional avalanche bulletins for those regions that people are traveling through where avalanches are a potential in Quebec. And then avalanche.org is for the States. So you can get all the same information in the States. The bulletins look a little different in the States, but the quality of the information and our definitions are the same. So it should be very easy to take that information and then apply it further down the road. One place that's special, and this is an amazing place to go skiing. If you are someone who likes ski touring and you'd love to do some skiing, at some point in your life you have to go to Rogers Pass, Glacier National Park. And Glacier National Park has amazing terrain and amazing snow, but it's big avalanche country, and it's also have an active avalanche control program for the highway. Not for us, for the highway. And as a result, they have a permit system so you don't get blown up during avalanche control. And so you go in and you click on the winter permit system. It takes you in, and basically you just go through it. It's an online course. And, do it the evening before you leave. It'll let you know what the rules are. It'll tell you what's open, what's closed, and it'll also tell you how to follow the process, because you need to get a card, and basically, they need to know that you understand the winter permit system. It is really nice because by doing this, so much more terrain has been opened up to the general public, and we've just been able to really enjoy it. Now, if you go to Rogers Pass, the first 19 trips will be in a snowstorm, because what makes Rogers Pass so amazing is the good snow, which is what makes this really useful. You can download a winter terrain atlas. Parks was really good about this. And as you go through here, you can just slip through and choose the areas like Cannock Creek Drainage, right beside the information center. Here's a photograph up, probably from, it might be on, over on Grizzly Shoulder, or it might be from the air. Okay, this is a run called the Hourglass. We get in here, here's Grizzly Mountain, a run pass called Frequent Flyer. We talk about it a lot. These are the teddy bear trees, classic area to go when conditions are getting a bit spooky. This is the Grizzly Slide Path. This is Grizzly Shoulder. Grizzly Shoulder is actually an area that is closed on some occasions due to avalanche control. Even on a blue sky day, it may be closed for avalanche control, but you can go past it and get up and use some of these other areas. The winter permit system shows you how to access the information and do it. But beyond that, it also shows you where all these little peaks are that you may have heard about but have no idea where they are. Puff Daddy, Grizzly West, everybody wants to ski Puff Daddy, and it's great, and it's free, and it's downloadable, and I think I know how to get out of it. Good. So there's another resource for you. As a ski tourer, that's just, it's fantastic skiing. Okay, so those are sort of the basic resources you have as a ski tourer to get out and play and make informed decisions, and that's really the key. And so I'm just going to show you a little video. This is from a project we did years ago, and it's just an excerpt from a documentary, but it's ski touring up onto the Columbia Icefield. And let me see if I can turn on.
Geologically speaking, few natural forces can alter a landscape more dramatically or rapidly than a glacier. Millions have visited the Athabasca Glacier, but few realize that it is a tiny fraction of the entire Columbia icefield. A crucial regional reservoir, the icefield feeds into 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Pacific. To experience this area requires several days on foot or skis to penetrate this polar landscape. Covering over 60 square miles and surrounded by massive peaks, including the highest peak in Alberta, Mount Columbia. The icefield is a reminder of the great ice sheets that once buried Canada and the northern United States.
Okay, folks, so that's kind of encompasses the full range of what's possible with ski touring. It can be nice, simple, gentle slopes. You can work your way up through glaciers, crevasse fields, through avalanche terrain. We did a ski ascent on Mount Kitchener. Then we built an igloo. Partly, the reason we built the igloo wasn't, well, the reason I built the igloo was for two reasons. One, it seemed very Canadiana, and we were doing a doc about Jasper National Park, so an igloo seemed natural, but also hauling a camera, tripod, batteries, and tape was so bulky and so heavy, I literally threw the tent out. And we built an igloo, but they look nice. But, you know, it really does sort of, I just love that experience. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, you know, skiing up an 11,000 foot peak, 3,400 meter peak. This is one of my favorite days in the mountains. Okay? Our son is 4 years old and discovering his mitt. And we had a really nice day. We were caretaking a backcountry lodge and we had the world to ourselves. And so things like that can really be the most memorable. It doesn't have to be big or challenging. It doesn't have to be difficult or dangerous because, you know, it's what is the most fun. And that stands out as one of my most memorable days in the mountains. And just by comparison, that same day, just 100 kilometers to the south of us, there was an avalanche accident that actually cost 7 people their lives. So it was also the kind of day where you did want to pull back and you didn't want to go out and do anything aggressive. And yeah, I just kept going in circles again and again and again while my son examined his mitt. He actually got to his first peak that day. Tiny little bump about 2 kilometers from the lodge. But, you know, it's about having fun. And so I hope this has been useful for you. Thank you very much for this experiment. And if you want more information, I'm happy to send you, I'm basically that trip planner that we went through. I have tied up into a tiny little ebook I can send to you, so you can just click on all those links and it'll take you directly to those sites. I can send you the PDF with the emergency contacts and information. And just take down my email, let me know you'd like it, and I will send it to you. And my pleasure. Do you guys have any questions? I have some time. I'm here all night. I'm home. That was my pleasure. Thank you, guys. The next one is next Wednesday. Same time, 7:30, and it'll be on avalanche safety. So it's not going to be an AST one, but it'll be a good introduction to sort of get a sense of what all the fuss is about. And for that course, I'll probably just use my ebook and walk us through that. Okay, so thanks, folks. It was my pleasure. Yes, the K-Country PDF is offline. I have the old one, and I'm happy to share it with the understanding that it's dated. So as soon as the new one comes up, load it up. But the old one is pretty good. Will I cover airbags in any of the presentations? I will talk about airbags in the next presentation on avalanche safety. In a nutshell, avalanche airbags work. There is no statistical evidence that they reduce trauma, but in a study done by Pascal Hagley, who did the first independent study on airbags, he's a Canadian researcher at Simon Fraser University. What Pascal found is that if you have a beacon, probe, and shovel, and you're fully buried within the test period, 80% of the victims lived. If you were caught in an avalanche with a beacon, probe, shovel, and an airbag, 90% of the victims lived. So of the victims who passed away without the airbag, those were full burials. And the people with airbags were involved in the same incident. And so they're making the assumption it was a similar situation. So Pascal's finding, depending on how you look at it, it increases the rate of, it doubles the rate of, it cuts in half the rate of fatalities. But when you look at survivals from 80 to 90%, it increases the survival rate by about 12%. Depends on how you read the stats. But they do work, and they work well. Oh, Morgan Tam says, I'll email me the backcountry 8s list. Okay, thanks. I'll check it and see compared to what I have. Airbags are expensive, but they're also useful. As to what is the best one, I do not know. There's a few different models out there, and the compressed gas ones are going down in price. The battery-packed ones, I think they've gone down a bit too. They're a bit more dynamic and flexible. But the thing to watch with the electric ones is the batteries are not guaranteed to work every time below -20. So that may change, but right now the lithium polymer batteries are not guaranteed reliable below -20. Mind you, most people don't go out below -20. So yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, I just keep going in circles around the camera. Okay, thanks folks. So I'll stick around for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, I will go have some dinner. Yeah. I'm a bit surprised nobody asked about bindings. There's a lot of new bindings coming out, and some of them are really good, and some of them still need a year or two to figure out all the warts. If you are wondering about bindings, my question is, or my advice is, just wait a year or two if something new comes out, because they'll have it figured out after a year or two, and then you're getting something that's pretty reliable. So one question is, I'd worry about a battery more than a year old or so. The lithium batteries generally have pretty good lifespans. I'm using, for our video work, I'm still working on batteries that are 7 years old, and they get pretty heavy use. But you're right; they do have a lifespan, and the good news is I believe they're a standard cell, so you can buy replacements. One of the limitations with the compressed gas ones is you can't fly with them unless the cartridge is empty. And so now you're in a foreign country looking for a place that can charge a canister. And that can be an issue, especially with North America and Europe having different compressed gas standards. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, folks. So I'm going, oh, here we are. How easy to get an empty canister refilled when you travel. Basically, you can get them refilled at almost any scuba shop. And a lot of backcountry outdoor operations can do it as well. But they need an adapter and a scuba tank to do it. So there are some limitations. But if you call ahead, especially if you're going to, like you're going to go to a backcountry lodge or something, they should have that information or be able to get it pretty fast. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, folks. I'm going to go have some dinner then. Thank you. I'm going to end the live stream, and thank you very much for the evening, and thanks for joining me.